If somewhere along the way you launched a podcast and it just sort of went away, went quiet, and now after months or even years, you want to get back into podcasting and you don't know where to start, this is where we start. There are 3 things I need you to do before you consider relaunching your podcast, some questions you need to answer so that you're set up for success, so that this time you can be consistent without being overwhelmed. That's what we're going to dig into today. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. I am selfishly very excited to have this conversation because this is one of the more common questions, because there's almost no podcasters who haven't ended up in some sort of extended break for one reason or another. And the questions around this are usually one of 2 flavors. It's been a short break, like a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. And there's the question of like, do I say anything or do I just start releasing episodes? And then the other version of this is where it's been a couple of months or maybe even like a year, a couple of quarters, like a year. And it's, should I go back to that show or should I start a completely new show? Has it been too long to return, so to speak? And honestly, these are both the wrong questions because they're answered by looking at the strategy. They're answered by doing some of the things we're going to talk about today that allow you to step confidently back into your show or into a new show, back into podcasting and however that looks, knowing that you're not going to create this same situation 2, 6, 8 months down the road, which is often what happens when we don't take these steps. We sort of end up in this sort of cycle of like excited about podcasting, overwhelmed by podcasting, not podcasting, excited about podcasting, overwhelmed by podcasting, not podcasting. And it becomes this loop. And this loop will almost never get you where you want to go with your show. It's very difficult to achieve the results you want to achieve from a show where you're constantly in this cycle. Now, I want to say here, because I am absolutely aware that there are shows that run in seasons, and the reason they run in seasons is to allow for some space between, and that's a different situation because there is an intentionality there. Now, I will say, I think seasons can be a great solution for somebody who's finding themselves in this loop, but it has to be a conscious choice. It has to be a strategic decision, and your show needs to be built to retain listeners season to season, and your marketing strategy needs to be built to be leveraging that podcast even when you're not releasing new episodes, so that your audience does not forget your show exists. So whether you're, subscribed to the idea that seasons are the solution here, and you want to jump back into the show and you're just going to release it seasonally, you still need to do the work we're going to talk about today, because these pieces are what allow you to keep that consistency without burning yourself out in whatever format your show looks like moving forward. I want to start our conversation today with probably the most overlooked piece of this, and frankly, the most important piece of this. So if you're coming back to a show, or you're coming back to the idea of podcasting, like let's not even say we're you've decided that you're going to restart the show you had. Like just you're coming home to podcasting, your instinct will be to skip this. In fact, your instinct won't even think about this at all. And it is the most critical thing you have to look at first. And that's why you quit. why you stopped. Because if we don't know why you stopped podcasting before, what created this break, you're going to end up in this loop. You're going to end up in that again. Because most often, and this is not 100% of the time, but like 90% of the time, it has something to do with our process. It is a process problem. Whether that is the getting the episodes recorded, whether that's the getting the episodes edited, whether that's getting the episodes released, whether that's marketing the episodes and feeling like you're getting results from your show, whether that's skipping the strategy, and so your shows are just feeling a bit haphazard and you don't even know what you're talking about. You ended up disconnected from the why of your show. And unless you understand why that disconnect happened, it's going to be really hard to maintain a connection with the why when you restart your podcasting excitement and journey and adventure. And so I want you to really spend some time with why you quit. Now, I'm pulling out the soapbox because we have to have this part of the conversation. This is not a quest to see what was wrong, what you did wrong, what you broke, how you were bad. There's no shame here. There's no judgment here. There's no bad. None of this is good or bad. It just is. It's just a state of evaluation. So if you are someone, and I say this because I work with you and I am you, who tends to reflect in judgment instead of in curiosity, I want you to be really conscientious of the energy you go into this with. This is one of the reasons I love having these conversations in like a podcast strategy intensive format, or occasionally I'll have people reach out to me just for like a single one-off session. I don't do these a ton, but if you ask, I'll send you a link and you can book one. It's just a one-time 1-hour call with me. This is how those get used a ton. This idea of like, I really want to come back to podcasting, but how do I know it's going to be different this time? It's like you're getting back together with a bad ex, right? You're like, how is it going to be better? How do we not just end up in the same loop and the same fight and the same whatever, right? You got to come at this with curiosity and not judgment. So sit down with a coach, with a consultant, with me, with a biz bestie, with somebody on your team, somebody who can guide you without necessarily contributing before you're ready, right? Who can say things like, okay, what is that? Why? Honestly, a toddler would be great for this job, but why? Remember that? And so you gotta look at those whys. Why did you quit? Because again, most of this is a process problem. So look and see. Oh, I was overwhelmed. Oh, I was busy. Oh, hey, yeah, the kid was home over summer break and just getting it all done wasn't possible. Oh, I launched this in the fall and then we went into our busy season because we launched our program at the same time and I got stuck in delivery and then we went on our holiday break and then whatever. Like oftentimes it's logistics. Like plain and simply logistics. And again, that's why we approach with curiosity, because if we came at this, we're like, oh, well, I couldn't do it. We can't solve that. We can say, oh, it was timing. This was happening. Oh, okay, well, we can account for that now. This is one of the reasons when we sit down quarterly with our production clients, we're mindful of what's up ahead. You know, I've got clients who have really active preteen and teen kids, and they're doing all sorts of really incredible summer stuff that my client wants to be a part of, or my client needs to shuttle them to, or whatever that looks like, sports or activities or whatever. So we need to buy them a little time in the summer. We need to buy them a little space. So we'll look at their data and we'll say, okay, here's what happens in the summer. Here's what plays well. Here's where our clients are. And we will strategically plan for that. We have some clients where we lean a lot into repurposing. We have some clients who we lean a lot into solo episodes because those can be batched more easily than the guest episodes can. We've got some clients who lean into the guest stuff because it feels like less of a lift for them. And so they can come on and they can have their conversation and they can be engaged. And it's two birds, one stone, right? It's networking, or it's reconnecting with a past client, or it's building a relationship with a referral partner, or whatever it is. We're able to do two things, but we're able to approach that strategically because we have the line of sight of understanding what hurdles there may be. And a really good way to understand what hurdles might come is to look at what hurdles have been. And that's why we have to start with this first piece of understanding why the pause happened, why you quit. From a place of curiosity, not from a place of judgment or shame. And that really leads us into our second piece of understanding why we're now wanting to restart. So where is the pull? Where is the draw to do this again? Because understanding that is going to help prevent us from being in the same position in 3 or 6 or 8 or 12 months. So where are you now that is pulling you forward? Is it something like you've been seeing a lot of Instagram ads about why podcasting is such a good idea? That's not a good reason to do it. It's simply not. Is it because you loved the medium and you were just overwhelmed and it was simply a capacity issue? Cool, we can address that with strategy. We can address that with process. I can solve those are solvable problems, babe. And so reconnect with this, why are you restarting? And not just the why are you restarting now, but why is the show going to exist moving forward? Because oftentimes what I find is part of the reason there was a pause, part of the reason there was a disconnect from doing the podcast previously is you don't understand where the podcast fits into your business. And that's where we come back to that podcast why in sort of the general sense. Why does this element exist in your business? Is it a tool to network? Is it a tool where you bring guests on and you have conversations with them to extend your relationship, get to know them better, give them a voice in front of your audience? Is it because your potential guests are your ideal clients? Is it because you know your ideal clients love consuming information in this way? And you want to be using it as a strategic sales tool to be educating them through the decision-making process to purchase with you? That's my why. Right? I want you to be connected with that. So why are you restarting? Why are you restarting? And why is the podcast need to exist? What is its purpose? And the reason I love looking at this is it allows us to start answering some of those questions around process and around structure for how you re-enter this. So if you know you want to be restarting this show because it's a medium you really like using, it's how you like getting content out. For example, I love podcasting because I am a terrible writer, and not in the like it's not my skill set way, but in the it's difficult for me to do way. I have a really hard time with a blank page. I tend to get my standard joke here is there's a way bigger filter between my fingers and my brain than my mouth and my brain. And so sitting down here and talking to the microphone and communicating with you with my voice is much easier for me than sitting down and writing you a note. When I write, I tend to be like point, note. Like there's no personality, there's no sillies, there's no cuteness, there's no charm. And we all know that the charm is why you're really here. Right? So for me, this is the easiest content for me to produce. And so it's why it's my content of choice, my medium of choice. That's paired with, it's a medium I know my clients enjoy consuming. It's a medium I know is effective for the kind of work I do, even before I sold podcasting. Because, I mean, now it feels a little obvious, but I've had a podcast for, oh goodness, 13 years now. Yeah. That's a long time to be podcasting. And I've sold different things here, not just podcasting. When I started this, I was a social media manager, and then I was a speaker primarily, and sold a membership and had courses. All of that was sold through here, even before I was selling podcast and podcast production. And so understanding where it fits in your communication style, understanding where it could fit with your ideal client's consumption style has to be part of that why. Because again, this starts to answer some of our strategic questions around frequency and length and all of those pieces, because we understand the connection to how they listen and how we produce. The third thing I want you to do after you start looking at this why you quit, why you're restarting, and where it fits, is to actually build a plan. Start using the answers to these whys to formulate your next steps. What I want you to notice is we've not recorded. Nothing has been recorded. We haven't told anybody. We haven't announced anything. Frankly, until we get to build a plan, we haven't actually decided anything. We spent a lot of time in data collection. That data collection is what's going to allow us to build an actionable plan. And again, this is the way we work through this when we do this in a podcast strategy intensive, is we work through this data collection and then implement a plan based on that data. Not how we feel, not the vibes, not our best guess, but the data we have in front of us. So use all this data you've collected to build your plan. Ask yourself, is this why for the podcast moving forward in line with the why that the podcast had previously? If that answer is no, you're going to need to evaluate whether you return to your past show or start a new show. The second question I'd ask there is around your ideal client. Is why they're listening the same now as why they were listening to the old show? If that answer is also no, you're definitely going to start a new podcast. If both of those answers are yes, yeah, it's time to jump back in. Now, how do we build a content plan and a process that allows us to do that without hitting the landmines we hit before? And that's the strategy you need. So does that mean that you need to be recording episodes 6 to 8 weeks before they release? Because that gives you enough buffer time for last minute crazy or holiday shifts? Does that mean that you bring in a production team who can sit with you each quarter and look at the strategy and decide what you're going to record so that you can implement a couple of batch days a month where you just sit down, you know what you need to record, you know why you're recording it, you just record it and you hand it back to them and they handle the production so that your team and you can just focus on the marketing. One of the really helpful things about having a production team like ours, doesn't have to be ours, but like ours, is you're sort of implementing this first 10%, last 10% mentality, right? You do the first 10% of the podcast, the actual recording, and you do the last 10% of the podcast, the actual sharing. Everything in the middle is handled by a team. That's powerful. That's valuable. It buys you back a lot of capacity, which can help wildly reduce overwhelm. So when we go to look at why you quit, why you stepped away from it, why you needed to pause, that's going to inform some of the things we need to implement for this new reentry to be sustainable, to be supportive, Once you've built your plan, whether that's with a consultant, on your own, with somebody on your team, whatever, once you've built your plan and you can say, here's what I'm recording for the next 12 weeks, here's how we restart, here's what we're doing as far as re-entering our old show or launching a new show. Once you have the answers to all of those questions, here's what our process looks like, etc., then you can start recording. Notice I didn't say start releasing. I said start recording, start producing. Record those episodes, get them produced, get them ready to release. Then we start releasing episodes. Now, does that mean you need to have a whole 12 weeks done? Not necessarily. You can decide that based on why you quit, why you're restarting, what your process needs to be to maintain consistency moving forward. You can decide. For some clients we've worked with, that's been, okay, as long as we've got a 4-week buffer, we're good, because we sort of start in our production cycle. For some clients, they like to have a little bit of extra time because they've got marketing teams on the other side of our release who are handling social and email and all of those elements, and they need more time. Cool. So we're buffed out a little further. And so if they were restarting today, I'd say, cool, you need to be done with the first 6 to 8 weeks of episodes. Then we can start releasing. For other clients, and a lot of these clients are intensive only clients. I can't think of anybody who we do this in production with, because all of our production clients run weekly year round. But we've got some intensive clients who sit down with us 2-3 times a year to plan out their season. And so the way their process is we sit down and do an intensive. We plan out their whole season. They go and produce their whole season, and then they release everything. And they've got their next intensive booked. And that process happens again. We sit down, we plan the whole season, and then they sit down and record everything, produce everything, and it gets released. That way, when they're in that release period of time, they're not in production. They have set their schedules up so that they are either in prep or marketing. When they are in strategy mode and production mode and actually getting those episodes ready, they're not worrying about marketing a show. Now, they may be marketing older episodes from the previous season while on that break to, again, keep that consistency of the listenership, keep those habits of marketing, etc., but they're not releasing any new episodes. So that seasonal break is their production season, really. That way, when the season is out, they can focus on A, marketing the show, and B, handling whatever is coming in because of the show. So for one of these clients, their seasons are attached to their launch calendar. And so they're in production and essentially delivery at the same time. And when they are in their sales season, they are releasing episodes so that they're available for the sales work that needs to come with the promotion they're doing. That can be really, really powerful, but they're able to do that because they build a plan, because they start ahead, because they have mapped this out with intentionality. And that's the key right there. And I hope that that's clear based on these steps that I've laid out here. Is this really comes down to intention. It really comes down to approaching this in a way that supports you and not is just one more gigantic list of things that you've got to get done. Because that is not sustainable. That is not supportive. And frankly, it's no damn fun. And what's the point? What is the point if it's not even a good time, right? All right. If you are looking for a little support, and I suspect you are, let's have a conversation. Let's get a podcast strategy intensive on the books. And if we sit down and we talk and an intensive is not the right fit, we can find out what is. So head on over to uncommonlymore.com/intensive. Book the initial conversation with me, if nothing else, and let's talk about how we can get you some support so we can get your show relaunched and out in the world, and you can be doing the incredible work that you do for as many people as possible. All right? I will see you right back here next week. Have a good one. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.